I hate to sound cynical because everybody wants, under the right terms, everybody wants the fighting to stop, the terrible situation for the Palestinian civilians to end, for an opportunity to rebuild. Everybody in general terms, they want that, right? And you bring some stability there. But I got to tell you, I mean, just talking with you now and just seeing what we've seen over the past couple of weeks, it seems like there's almost no likelihood that we're getting a second phase of this ceasefire agreement.
No, the odds again were extremely remote. I put them at essentially zero when this began. I thought it was encouraging to see the exchange of hostages, and again, new administration in Washington certainly has opened up the door to greater leverage against Hamas. But again, it's an impossible scenario in which Israel would vacate and essentially restore conditions that led to October the 7th. That is the least politically acceptable outcome in Israel. Those that supported any sort of two-state solution or peace process were exactly the casualties on October the 7th and the inhabitants of the kibbutzim. And they were the direct target of their attacks. And so there's no segment of the population now that supports a withdrawal or continued negotiations essentially with Hamas. And so you're right to be cynical about it. And in the end, it comes down to motive, means, and opportunity. The motive is going to endure on the part of Hamas and the Palestinians, unfortunately, in Gaza. It's now a matter of denying them the means and the opportunity to restore the capacity to lead to another October the 7th attack. Okay, so let's play that out then. Let's say that, unfortunately, on Saturday, there's no movement into a second phase. And the IDF decides, okay, we have no choice. We have to go after and continue to go after Hamas. What does that look like? Because, honestly, look, we've already got, ramped up protests in New York City, pro-Hamas protests going on in New York City on, Barnard College campus. And you could imagine those stepping up again. I don't see the international community, including the UN, staying quiet over renewed hostilities and the IDF going in, and yet more visuals of destruction and civilian death in Gaza. Yeah, well, it's a great point. I say two things. First is I don't know that a restoration of a resumption of military operations means that they necessarily go on the offensive. This could well look like a continued attrition. And as long as the external support is denied by Israel, you don't necessarily have to do large-scale military operations or a significant campaign. What it could look like, again, is a sort of a siege on Gaza where they would no longer be provided the material to launch rocket attacks and conduct operations against the Israelis. And then you could see surgical operations against its leadership, strikes that were enabled by overflight operations, which almost certainly will continue if the ceasefire discussions break down. I don't know that it means you're going to see a resumption of a ground campaign, and I don't know that that's necessary from an Israeli perspective. Now, you could imagine if that was the case, if you sort of a siege mentality, which, again, the optic's not necessarily good, but I take your point, right? And then specific targeted strikes against, either specific, commanders or lieutenants or whomever, fighters within the strip. If you were to combine that with the optic, right, of increased aid flowing to the civilian population, then perhaps that mitigates to some degree that negative international narrative that always surfaces during these conflicts. It might. Again, two observations. First is after the exchange of remains of hostages, there's not that much sympathy left for Hamas. They're losing, I think, a great deal of the support, and there's a tremendous amount of fatigue on the issue more broadly. Second, that the Israeli populace, by and large, feels significantly aggrieved, certainly now. And I don't think they're going to be quite as affected by international condemnation if military operations in any scale resume. And again, the critical part here is they've got a more supportive partner in Washington this time around. So I don't suspect that the Israeli calculus is going to be affected by international condemnation at this point. Yeah, no, I take your point. I think they pretty much decided early on after the 7 October attacks that they are on their own, or at least have to proceed on their own. And yes, the dynamics change now with the election and the arrival of the Trump administration. What can you tell us about the level of aid, though, that is flowing or that has been flowing since, say, the ceasefire started? And to what degree are we confident that aid is
is not being taken or managed by Hamas?
Well, on the first point, a fair amount of aid is being introduced into the area and has been for some time. The statistics are public. The difficulty is your second point, which is the distribution. Again, there's limited infrastructure to do it, and there's limited capacity to do it. The only governing organization that unfortunately exists inside of Gaza has been Hamas, and so that infrastructure now is increasingly reliant. Now, there are those that would say that UNRWA performed this function in partnership with other NGOs. Many of them have complicated relationships, and many were providing material support to Hamas. Some were engaged in operations with Hamas and are no longer capable. So it's the distribution that's a problem, but it's not a volume issue, really, at the end of the day. It's just reinforcing Hamas's position as the only governing entity in Gaza. That serves no one's interest, actually.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.